According to Dr. G.S. Rajia's YouTube, we're about to step into a world where high-stakes engineering meets human biology.
Mhm.
Usually when people talk about weight loss surgery, gastric bypass, the whole conversation is just about the before and after.
Which makes sense. That's the visible result, right?
Oh,
That's what people see. But to get there, surgeons are basically performing some incredibly complex plumbing deep inside the body.
exactly. And that's where we're going today. We are not looking at the weight loss, we're looking under the hood.
Right.
We want to visualize how a surgeon literally rewires the digestive system. And here's the hook. What happens like 5, 10, maybe 15 years down the road when that new wiring creates a massive problem?
It's the law of unintended consequences. You solve one huge problem, obesity, but in doing so, you create a brand new anatomical map.
A new map.
And when something else goes wrong later, say with the bile ducts, that new map suddenly becomes a maze.
It really is a locked room mystery. It's like you renovate your house, you wall off the kitchen, seal the door, which is great. You've got more living room space. But then 5 years later, the sink in that walled-off kitchen bursts a pipe. How do the plumbers even get in?
That is the perfect analogy for the medical puzzle we're diving into.
Yeah.
And the solution we're going to talk about, this thing called the EGD procedure, is honestly one of the most clever hacks I've ever seen in medicine.
So our mission for this deep dive is to basically act as your guides through this whole anatomical renovation.
Yeah. We need to understand the layout of the house before we can understand the heist to break back into it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Gastric bypass.
Right. And we start with the definition. It's one of the most common surgeries for morbid obesity. It's considered standard, but, well, standard makes it sound simple, and it is anything but.
So let's visualize this rewiring. There are two big mechanisms at play here: restriction and bypass. Let's do restriction first.
Restriction is the part that's pretty intuitive. The surgeon takes the stomach, which is normally, a large muscular bag, and staples off a tiny section at the very top. We call this the gastric pouch.
And when you say tiny, we're not talking about cutting a melon in half. This is like the size of an egg, right?
Or a walnut.
Yeah.
It's very small. So physically, the patient just cannot eat a large amount of food. The tank is full after just a few bites. That's restriction.
Okay, but here's the part that always gets me. You create this tiny pouch. What happens to the rest of the stomach? The huge part you just stapled off.
It just stays there. This is what we call the remnant stomach. It's still alive, it has a blood supply,
Right.
and critically, it's still just sitting there in the abdomen.
But no food goes into it.
And no food ever touches it again. It's
Yeah.
completely disconnected from the food stream.
It's a ghost stomach. It's just there.
Exactly. And that ghost stomach is going to become the main character of our story in a little bit. But first, we have to finish the plumbing. We have the pouch. Now we need the bypass.
This is the second lever, right? It's not just about limiting food. It's about limiting how many calories the body can even absorb from that food.
Correct. So the surgeon goes down to the small intestine, specifically a part called the jejunum, and they make a cut. They bring the bottom end of that cut all the way up and connect it directly to that tiny gastric pouch.
And this connection has a name, the gastro-jejunostomy.
You're getting good at the terminology.
Yeah.
Gastro for stomach, jejunal for jejunum, stomy for connection. So now picture a bite of food. It goes down the esophagus, hits that tiny pouch, and then immediately drops into the jejunum.
It completely skips the ghost stomach, and it also skips the duodenum, the very first part of the small intestine.
Correct. And because it skips that whole first section, the food doesn't mix with key digestive juices right away, which means it has less time to be absorbed. That's the bypass effect.
But wait, there's a loose end. We cut the intestine, we pulled one end up to the pouch. What about the other end, the one that's still attached to the ghost stomach?
Great catch. You can't just leave that dangling inside the body. That part is still attached to the remnant stomach, and even though no food is going in, the liver and pancreas are still dumping bile and enzymes into it.
Oh, because the liver has no idea a surgery happened. It's just doing its job.
Exactly. So that limb, we call it the biliopancreatic limb, is full of powerful digestive juices. You have to reconnect it to the food stream somewhere.
So where does it get plugged in?
You connect it back into the jejunum, but a few feet down from the pouch. And this creates a Y shape.
The famous raison Y.
Yes. Picture the letter Y. The left arm is the food coming down from the pouch. The right arm is all those digestive juices coming from the ghost stomach side. They meet at the intersection, and then everything flows down the stem of the Y together.
Okay, I think I have the mental map. We've made a detour for the food, a service road for the juices, and they merge farther down the highway.
Perfect visualization. And for years, this works great. The patient loses weight.
Yeah.
But This new anatomy sets the stage for a nightmare scenario if the patient develops a very specific problem: bile duct stones.
Which brings us to the plot twist. Bile duct stones are basically gallstones that have escaped and gotten stuck in the main pipe, right?
Yes. And they are really painful and dangerous. They can block the flow of bile, cause infections, jaundice. You have to get them out.
And in a normal person, someone with the original factory plumbing, this is a routine procedure called ERCP.
Endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography.
Still not going to say that. I'll stick with ERCP. But normally, it's almost like a video game. You go down the throat, find the door, grab the prize.
It's very straightforward. You take a special side viewing scope, slide it down the esophagus, through the stomach, into the duodenum, and there you find a little opening called the ampulla.
The ampulla, that's the doorway where the bile duct drains into the intestine.
Right. You find that doorway, you slide a tiny wire in, you open it up, and you pull the stones out. Maybe it takes 20, 30 minutes.
But in our gastric bypass patient, we have a huge problem. The ampulla isn't where it's supposed to be. Or rather, we can't get to it.
The ampulla is in that bypass section. It's connected to the ghost stomach. So if you put a scope down a bypass patient's throat, you go into the pouch, and then you're dumped into the food limb of the intestine.
You're miles away from where you need to be. You're on the wrong highway completely.
Exactly. The door to the bile duct is locked in a part of the house you can no longer get to. The stairs have been removed.
So what did doctors do? Historically, I mean.
They had to attempt what we call the long circuitous route. And I really want you to picture this because it sounds exhausting just describing it.
Circuitous is doing a lot of work in that name.
It is. So to reach the ampulla, the doctor has to use a special extra long scope. They go down the esophagus, into the pouch, and into that food limb of the intestine.
Okay, following the food path.
Then they have to travel all the way down that limb to that Y intersection where the juices join in.
And that's, what, 100 centimeters? Maybe more?
Oh, easily. And once they get to that Y intersection, they have to do something remarkably difficult. They have to make a U-turn with a scope and drive up the other limb.
They have to drive against traffic up that service road.
Yes. They have to push this long, flexible tube up the biliopancreatic limb, fighting against the natural contractions of the gut, just to try and find the ampulla.
That sounds unstable. I'm picturing the scope just coiling up on itself inside the belly instead of moving forward.
That is exactly what happens. The intestine is soft, it's stretchy. So you push the scope from your end, and instead of advancing, it just forms a big loop. You lose all your force.
And even if you do manage to get there,
you're at the absolute limit of your equipment's length. The scope is twisted. You're unstable.
Right.
The technical success rate is, well, it's not great.
That's the polite medical way of saying it fails a lot.
It fails a lot. And when it fails, the patient might need actual invasive surgery just to get a simple stone out. It's a really big deal.
Okay, so we have a clear problem. The anatomy is great for weight loss, but it breaks the axis for maintenance. We need a shortcut. And this is where EGD comes in.
This is the innovation. EGD, E-D-G-E.
Ultrasound-directed gastrogastrostomy.
It's a mouthful, but let's break it down. Gastrostomy. That means a stomach-to-stomach connection.
Wait, stomach to stomach? Oh, you mean connecting the tiny pouch to the ghost remnant stomach?
Precisely.
Yeah.
This is the brilliant part. Anatomically, even though those two parts of the stomach are disconnected on the inside, they're usually sitting right next to each other in the body. They're neighbors separated by a thin wall.
So the goal is to just tunnel through the wall, but how? You can't see the ghost stomach from inside the pouch. It's dark in there.
That is where the ultrasound-directed part comes in. We don't use a normal camera scope. We use an EUS scope endoscopic ultrasound.
So it's a scope with a little sonar on the tip.
Exactly. You slide this scope down into that tiny pouch. You press its tip against the stomach wall. The ultrasound waves travel right through the tissue, and on your screen, you can see exactly what's on the other side.
Like using a stud finder to see what's behind the drywall.
A very, very expensive stud finder, yes. You scan around until you see the fluid-filled remnant stomach right next door. You find the perfect safe spot, away from any big blood vessels.
Okay, so you found the target. Now you have to make the tunnel. But if you just poke a hole, wouldn't stomach acid leak out everywhere? That sounds like a disaster.
It would be a total disaster.
Yeah.
That's peritonitis. So you don't just poke a hole, you place a special device called a lumen-opposing metal stent, or LAMS.
Break that down. Lumen opposing.
It means it brings the two spaces, the two lumens, together. The stent is shaped kind of like a dumbbell. It has a flange on one end and a flange on the other.
I see. So you deploy one end in the ghost stomach, and the other end stays in the pouch.
And as that stent expands, It pulls the two stomach walls tight against each other. It clamps them together, creating a perfectly sealed, watertight tunnel between the two.
That is incredible. You've basically installed a service hatch.
You have. You've hacked the bypass. You've recreated that connection that the surgeon originally cut.
So now the bridge is built. How does that help with the stone?
This is the really satisfying part. You pull out the ultrasound scope. You put in your standard ERCP scope. You go down the esophagus into the pouch, and right there you see this shiny metal stent.
And you just drive through it.
You drive right through it.
Yeah.
And suddenly you are in the remnant stomach, the ghost stomach.
And from there?
From there, the roadmap is normal.
Yeah.
You're back to factory settings. You just follow the remnant stomach down to the duodenum, and there's the ampulla, right where it's supposed to be.
No looping, no driving against traffic.
None of that. You're approaching the ampulla head on, just like in a patient who never even had the surgery. It's stable, it's close, and the success rate is incredibly high.
That is genius. You use technology to temporarily reverse the anatomy just long enough to solve the problem.
It's a complete game changer. Instead of a long, tortuous, high-failure procedure or invasive surgery, you have this controlled internal shortcut.
I have to ask, though, what about the stent? Does that little window just stay open forever?
Usually no. Once the stones are out and the patient is better, you can go back in a few weeks later and just pull the stent out.
And the hole just closes.
Usually heals up on its own, or you can place a small clip to help it along. You seal the hatch back up.
So you restore the bypass, you put the ghost stomach back into retirement.
Exactly. You don't want to leave it open permanently, because then food could start going down the old path, and the patient might regain weight. You only keep the shortcut open for as long as you need it.
It's just amazing to think about the layers here. First, you have the surgical innovation of the bypass. Then you have the problem that innovation created. And then a second innovation, the 8AGE procedure, to navigate the first one.
It's a constant evolution. Medicine isn't static. As we get better at altering anatomy to treat diseases like obesity, we also have to get better at, navigating those alterations.
It really makes you appreciate that remnant stomach, doesn't it? We think of it as leftover, but in this case, it's the hero. If it wasn't just sitting there right next to the pouch, none of this would be possible.
That is a fascinating point. In the body, what looks like wasted space or retired tissue suddenly becomes the critical access point to save a patient's life.
It changes how you look at the diagrams. It's not just plumbing lines. It's a dynamic 3D environment.
And it requires doctors to think in 3D. The person who came up with EGD wasn't just thinking about the GI tract as a single tube. They were visualizing the spatial relationship between organs. They realized, hey, the answer isn't down that long road. The answer is right through the wall.
It's lateral thinking, literally.
Literally.
So, to recap this deep dive, we visualized the Y-shaped plumbing of a gastric bypass. We saw how that creates a locked room for the bile duct. We suffered through the long circuitous route.
Which I'm glad we don't have to drive anymore.
And finally, we explored the 8EGD procedure, using ultrasound to see through walls and a dumbbell stent to build a bridge, turning an impossible mission into a routine drive.
It's a perfect example of how technology is expanding what we can do without ever making an incision on the skin.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a thought. We spend so much time optimizing systems. A computer network, a city grid, the human body. We streamline, we bypass the unnecessary parts. But this story kind of teaches us that sometimes the most valuable thing you have is the legacy system you left behind, the remnant. Because you never know when you might need to build a bridge back to the old way of doing things.
That's a profound way to look at it. Never burn your bridges. Or, in this case, never discard your remnant stomach.
This deep dive was based on Dr. G.S. Raju's YouTube. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.
See you next time.